Morning fog settled over the apple hills of Asheville like a thin scarf of autumn. The sun hadn't risen fully yet. Only a few pale beams slipped through the damp leaves, glittering as if someone had sprinkled salt over the grass. The air smelled of young apples, old wood, and freshly brewed coffee. The kind of scent that makes you feel both homesick and safe. Coal Valley Farm rested quietly in the valley, a two-story wooden house with a wide porch overlooking the orchard. From afar, it looked peaceful, almost serene. But inside, silence hung heavy, like fog that refused to lift. Ethan Walker, the owner, stood by the window. 47 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, his face carried the weight of loss. A framed photo of his late wife sat on the table beside a steaming cup of coffee. He touched the frame gently, a habit he kept every morning, the way a man touches memory without wanting to let it go. Upstairs, Noah, his 10-year-old son, was still asleep, or pretending to be. A year earlier, a horse accident had left the boy with an injured leg and a silence that cut deeper than bone. Since then, he spoke little, communicating through short notes. Every step he took was its own quiet battle. His room overlooked the orchard, once the happiest place in the house, now painfully still. Outside, the sound of a tractor echoed and faded. Another workday was beginning. Mrs. Yates, the housekeeper, opened the front door and said softly, "Heavy fog this morning, Mr. Walker." He nodded. Her voice, warm and steady, reminded him of the mother he no longer had. "Yes," he murmured. "Maybe the season's changing." He passed through the hallway, where his wife's old painting still hung, an orchard bathed in gold light. The painting remained, only the painter was gone. Beneath it rested Noah's crutches, silent and still, a punctuation mark in the house's grief. Ethan paused, touched the handle and drew a long breath. On the porch, May Turner, the cook, was brewing coffee. She gave him a knowing look, the look of someone who had witnessed too much silence. "Made an extra cup," she said with half a smile, "in case you wanted company." Ethan smiled faintly. "Thank you, May, but I think I'll drink alone." The steam drifted into the cold air. Wind chimes rang softly on the porch, blending with the distant call of a rooster. Another day began, with fog, with the smell of coffee, with fragile warmth, and a loneliness that no one dared to name. No one in the house knew that, somewhere down the winding road, a stranger was coming. A stranger who would change everything. That morning, while the mist still clung to the roof, Ethan stood by the window, his coffee long gone cold. He stared at the winding dirt road below, a road that for months had seen nothing but delivery trucks. Yet today, there was someone walking toward the house. A silver bus had just disappeared over the hill, leaving behind a thin trail of dust. The woman who stepped down adjusted the strap of her suitcase and paused to breathe in the morning air. From a distance, she looked small, almost fragile, yet there was steadiness in her step, the kind of strength born from surviving too much. The early light brushed her face, revealing gentleness mixed with quiet weariness. Her name was Clara Evans, the new housekeeper Mrs. Yates had mentioned. Inside her worn suitcase were a few clothes, a small Bible, a photo of her mother, and a letter of employment. But what she truly carried was something less visible. Hope, faint but alive enough to keep her moving forward. Clara stopped before the wooden gate of Coal Valley Farm. The scent of ripe apples and wet grass mingled with the cool wind. She smiled softly to herself, thinking, if there's a place to begin again, maybe it's here. The gate opened. Mrs. Yates, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of face that could command or comfort, stepped out to greet her. "Miss Evans?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm Clara." "I'm Yates, the housekeeper. Welcome to Coal Valley. Folks here don't talk much, but they do their work. If you mean to do yours, you'll be fine." "Thank you. I will." Mrs. Yates nodded and led her along the wooden porch. The boards creaked underfoot, sunlight spilling through the slats like spilled gold. The house stood quiet and dignified, too well kept, as though time itself had chosen not to pass here. In the kitchen, May Turner stirred a pot over the stove. The smell of apple pie filled the air. Seeing the newcomer, May smiled warmly. "Ah, there you are. I'm May, keeper of the kitchen, and some say, the keeper of this home's secrets." "Nice to meet you," Clara replied politely. "None of that ma'am business," May laughed. "Makes me sound old. Around here we keep it simple." Clara nodded, her eyes wandering over the cozy room. The hanging pans, the jars by the window, the sunlight dancing on 2 coffee cups on the table, one of them likely Ethan's. There was a tenderness hidden in this place, as if the house had once known joy and simply forgotten how to show it. May placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Just work with kindness," she said softly. "Everything else will find its way." Clara smiled, her heart easing. That afternoon, after unpacking in the small room beside the kitchen, she opened the window. Before her stretched a sea of green, rows of apple trees glowing beneath the slanting light. She placed her mother's photo on the table beside a jar of wildflowers she'd picked along the road. When she looked up, she saw a boy on the second-floor balcony, Noah, with crutches at his side, watching her. His eyes carried both fear and curiosity. Clara lifted her hand in a gentle wave, her smile as soft as sunlight. The boy didn't wave back. He stepped away and closed the door quietly. Clara kept smiling, whispering to herself, "That's all right, sweetheart. Good things take time." The evening wind carried the scent of ripe apples through the open window, and for the first time in a long while the house seemed to breathe, softly, but truly. Clara's first morning at Coal Valley began with the chirping of sparrows and the pale light seeping through the thin curtains. She woke earlier than everyone else, tied back her hair, slipped on her apron, and began her chores, sweeping the floor, tidying the kitchen, polishing the hallway. Each stroke of her broom sounded like the steady breathing of the house itself. She moved quietly, gently, making no noise where silence lived. As she wiped the window frames, she hummed softly, a tender, wordless tune her mother used to sing while hanging laundry in the sun. Her voice floated through the rooms like warm wind on a cold day. From the doorway, May watched for a moment and said with a smile, "You've got the kind of voice that makes even the dust behave." Clara laughed lightly but said nothing, unaware that her song had drifted up to the second floor, into Noah's room. The boy was sitting by the window, flipping through a picture book. He wasn't really reading, just staring at the drawings. When he heard the humming, he paused. The sound was faint, almost fragile, yet it carried a strange warmth that made the stillness in his room shift, if only a little. That afternoon, while Clara was dusting the living room, she heard a faint clink from the staircase. Looking up, she saw Noah struggling to reach a small toy car that had fallen down a few steps. It was metal, old, its red paint chipped. The boy froze when he realized she'd seen him. His crutches leaned against the railing, his thin arms trembling as he tried to balance. Clara didn't rush toward him. She simply walked closer, picked up the toy, blew the dust off, and said softly, "Looks fast. What's his name?" Noah didn't answer. He only nodded, eyes darting away. Clara held the toy out, careful not to step too close. "When I was little, I had a red car too. It didn't run unless I imagined it did. Maybe this one works the same way." She smiled, gentle, patient, the kind of smile that didn't demand anything in return. Noah took the toy, pressed it to his chest, as if afraid it might vanish. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Clara didn't wait for an answer. She simply nodded and went back to cleaning, her presence quiet as air. When she left, Noah looked after her, uncertain but no longer afraid. In the days that followed, Clara began leaving little notes on his desk, sometimes just a sentence. "The sky looks bluer today," or "A squirrel stole an apple from the fence. Don't tell anyone." Beside each note, she placed a small yellow flower. At first, he didn't respond, but a few days later, on Clara's folding table downstairs, she found a small scrap of paper. 2 words, written unevenly. "Thank you." She smiled. After that, his replies grew slightly longer. "The flower leaned today," or "The car works now." Each word felt like a hesitant step forward, fragile but real. Ethan noticed the change first. One morning, he entered Noah's room quietly and saw his son holding one of Clara's notes, smiling. A shy, uncertain smile, but a smile nonetheless. It was the first he'd seen in over a year. Ethan stood at the doorway, watching, his throat tightening. That small curve of joy on his boy's face was like hearing the first bird after a long, cold winter. Downstairs, May saw the shift too. Ethan's voice grew softer, his eyes less distant. The whole house seemed to breathe differently. The floorboards creaked lighter. The coffee smelled stronger, and the morning light found its way into forgotten corners. Clara hadn't done anything grand. She hadn't changed the world. She just cleaned, hummed, and left behind small notes and flowers. But sometimes healing begins that way. With things so small, they almost go unnoticed. A yellow flower on a desk, a quiet smile, a house learning how to breathe again. Ever since Noah began smiling again, the air at Coal Valley felt different. Clara's quiet humming blended with the birds outside, and even Ethan's footsteps on the old floorboard sounded lighter. Some mornings, he was seen pausing by the window, watching his son play with the little red car, a small smile flickering across his face. But peace rarely lasts long. That weekend, a black car rolled up to the gate. Before the dust could settle, Vanessa Reed, Ethan's fiancée, stepped out. Her heels clicked sharply on the ground. Cock, cock, and the air filled with the scent of expensive perfume, rich and commanding. She wore a beige-fitted dress, hair perfectly curled, makeup flawless, as if she were arriving at a gala, not a countryside farm. Mrs. Yates and May came out to greet her, but Vanessa only gave a polite, distant smile. "Where's Ethan?" she asked curtly. "Out by the orchard, ma'am," Yates replied. "Good, I'll go find him." She nodded, leaving a trail of perfume behind like a signature. Ethan looked up in surprise when he saw her approaching. "Vanessa? You didn't call." "I missed you," she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "And I wanted to see this place you call home." His smile was polite, hesitant. He showed her around, the fields, the blooming apple trees, the workers. Vanessa listened, but her eyes lingered on the dust on his sleeves, that rustic imperfection she could never quite accept. When they returned to the porch, Noah was sitting on the steps, polishing his toy car, while Clara knelt beside him, helping wipe the wheels clean. They laughed softly as the car slid down the last step. The scene made Vanessa stop. In the golden light, Clara wore a simple blue cotton dress, her hair tied back, her face calm and honest. The laughter between her and Noah was like sunlight through glass. Clear, unforced, painfully pure. Vanessa tightened her grip on her purse. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "So this must be the new help," she said, voice light but cool. Clara stood, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Clara. Nice to meet you." "Vanessa Reed," she replied, emphasizing, "Mr. Walker's fiancée." She paused. "Seems like you've become quite popular around here." Clara smiled politely. "I just do my job, ma'am." "Good," Vanessa said smoothly, then turned to Noah. "And who do we have here?" The boy said nothing, his hands still clutching the toy. Clara stepped back, but Vanessa knelt beside him, her tone dripping with sugar. "I brought you something, sweetheart." She opened her purse, pulling out a shiny video game console, a pair of sneakers with blinking lights, and a stack of branded shirts. "These will make you happier than..." She glanced at Clara. "Country games." Noah looked at the gifts, then shook his head. He glanced at Clara, then down again, polishing his toy in silence. Vanessa's smile stiffened. "Guess he prefers old things." The air tightened. Ethan tried to speak, but Clara said gently, "He just needs time, ma'am. We all do." Vanessa looked at her, a flicker of cold amusement in her eyes. "Maybe," she said softly, perfume hanging heavy between them. "But some people seem to be forgetting their place in this house." Her words fell quietly, but cut through the air like a blade. Clara lowered her gaze. Ethan frowned. Noah looked up, confusion darkening his small face. Then Vanessa looped her arm through Ethan's, voice turning sweet again. "Come on, darling. I'm starving. Let's have lunch." Clara gathered the cleaning cloths and walked toward the kitchen. The perfume lingered, not unpleasant, but choking all the same. From the window, May watched and murmured, "That smell? It's not perfume. It's trouble." Outside, the wind stirred the yellow flower Clara had picked that morning. It still stood upright, but a storm was coming. That afternoon, silence hung over the house. Vanessa rested in the living room, flipping through a fashion magazine, her perfume clinging to the air. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at numbers he couldn't see. Upstairs, faint sounds echoed, the soft tap of crutches, then stillness. Clara heard them. She stood in the hallway, sunlight spilling through the tall windows, laying golden ribbons across the wooden floor. The hall stretched long and clear, a path waiting for a beginning. She smiled to herself. By late afternoon, she had cleared the hallway, moved the flower pots aside, polished the floor until it gleamed. With strips of colored tape, she marked 2 parallel lines, dividing them by distance. When Noah peeked out of his room, Clara turned and said, "What do you think? This is our mini racetrack." He blinked, confused. "A race?" "Yes, just 3 steps today. No rush. Every meter is a victory." He hesitated. Memories of pain flickered behind his eyes. But something in her tone, soft, steady, made him nod. She stepped back, clapped once. "Whenever you're ready, Racer Noah." He inhaled, planted his crutches, and took a step. Thump. Another. Clara matched his rhythm, whispering encouragement like a prayer. 3 meters. 4. Sweat gathered on his brow, but his eyes shone bright, afraid, proud, alive. At the far end of the hall, Ethan appeared. He froze, breath caught. For months he had only seen his son sitting by a window, silent as a shadow. Now he watched him walk, trembling but walking. Clara spoke softly. "Almost there, Noah. One more step." The boy gritted his teeth, his crutches shaking, but he pushed forward. When he reached the end, his knees buckled, and Clara steadied him gently. "You did it," she whispered, voice trembling. Noah looked up, panting, smiling for the first time in months. "I won." Ethan turned away, wiping his eyes before anyone could see. Inside, something heavy finally began to melt, but peace never lasts long. From the other end of the hallway came the sharp rhythm of high heels. Vanessa appeared, dressed in ivory, lips painted red. Her gaze locked onto Clara's hand on Noah's shoulder, and froze. "What is this?" Her voice sliced the air. "Therapy? Or are you playing doctor now?" Silence. Clara straightened, calm but firm. "He wanted to try, ma'am. I just helped him take a few steps." "Try?" Vanessa scoffed. "You don't try with Ethan's son. You're staff. Remember your place." Noah lowered his head, his hands trembling on the crutches. Ethan stepped forward, his tone low but restrained. "Vanessa, that's enough. She was just helping." "Helping?" Her eyes flashed. "She's overstepping. This is the therapist's job, not the maid's." Clara said nothing. She only bent down, picked up the fallen crutch, and handed it to Noah. "You did great today," she whispered. "That's what matters." Noah looked up at her, eyes glassy but full of trust. "Tomorrow, I'll walk farther." Vanessa turned sharply, her perfume filling the hall, thick, cloying, suffocating. As she disappeared around the corner, Ethan remained still. He could see it clearly now. Vanessa ruled with pride, Clara healed with kindness. And that difference frightened Vanessa more than anything. The wind slipped through the open window, stirring the yellow flower on the sill. It tilted but did not fall. Small, bright, steadfast. A quiet miracle had begun, and so had the storm it would awaken. After the mini racetrack day, the Coal Valley farmhouse seemed calm again. Too calm. Vanessa still smiled, still spoke gently to everyone, but behind her eyes glimmered a cold, deliberate light. She had seen enough. Noah's laughter because of Clara, Ethan's softened tone whenever that woman entered the room. The jealousy inside her had ripened into something sharp and poisonous. That evening, while everyone was preparing dinner, Vanessa opened the wine cabinet and chose a bottle of Bordeaux. Ethan had been saving for years. Her voice was sweet as honey. "Darling, let me pour. This wine fits the night perfectly." Ethan nodded and turned to fetch the opener. Just then, Clara passed by with a tray of dishes. Vanessa tilted her wrist, just slightly, and the bottle slipped. Crash. Red wine splashed across the tiles, spreading like spilled blood. Vanessa gasped, feigning shock. "Oh my God, Clara! I told you to stay back." Clara froze. "I didn't touch it, ma'am." Ethan frowned. "It's fine. Just an accident." Vanessa sighed softly, her tone mournful. "Still, such a shame. That was the bottle you saved for your partners." Clara crouched to clean, silent, but her heart sank. She knew this was no accident. 2 days later, a louder crash broke the afternoon calm. The antique vase, Ethan's mother's heirloom, lay shattered on the living room floor. Vanessa stood amid the wreckage, pale-faced, but composed. "I told you to dust around it, not touch it." "I didn't," Clara began, but Ethan entered. Vanessa turned, gripping his arm gently. "See? I warned you, she's careless." He looked between the broken porcelain and Clara. Doubt flickered across his face, faint but fatal. "I'm sorry, sir," Clara whispered, "but I didn't do it." Vanessa placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't be angry with her, darling. Maybe she's just tired." That night, Clara sat by her window, staring at the faint glow from Noah's room. She wondered how a heart could be punished simply for caring too much. The next morning, Vanessa moved on to her final act. She knew Noah's severe almond allergy and how careful Clara always was about it. While Clara was outside hanging laundry, Vanessa slipped into the boy's room and placed a box of chocolates on his desk, neatly tied with a ribbon. On top, she left a note in a shaky hand. "For you after dinner, C." Hours later, a weak cry came from upstairs. Noah couldn't breathe. His lips were pale, his chest rising in panic. Ethan rushed him down the stairs, shouting for help. Clara appeared, horrified, spotting the open box on the floor. The label clear, contains almonds. "I didn't give him this!" she cried. Vanessa appeared in her robe, her voice trembling just enough. "I saw you carrying that box earlier, unless I was mistaken." "You're lying," Clara's voice broke. "I would never hurt him." Ethan said nothing, torn between fear and doubt. When the ambulance left, Vanessa stood beside him and whispered, "I know you don't want to believe it, Ethan, but every accident seems to start with her." He stayed silent, and that silence cut deeper than any accusation. 2 days later, Vanessa entered Clara's room holding an empty velvet case. "Ethan's looking for his mother's bracelet. You haven't seen it, have you?" "No, ma'am." "Why don't you check your drawers, just in case?" Vanessa said softly, smiling. Clara opened the wardrobe and froze. The golden bracelet lay wrapped in her handkerchief. Her breath caught. "No, that's not," Vanessa sighed. "Such a disappointment." That evening, Ethan called Clara into the study. The lamplight made the shadows on his face look older, heavier. "Clara, I don't know what's happening, but I have to protect my son." She nodded once. "I understand, sir. Thank you for letting me stay this long." She packed her old suitcase quietly, folding each item like closing a memory. When she stepped outside, the air smelled of apples and goodbye. Upstairs, Noah stood by the window, holding the wilted yellow flower. He tapped the glass, but she couldn't hear. The wheels of her suitcase rolled away on the dusty path, her figure fading into the dusk. In the parlor, Vanessa sat alone, pouring herself wine. Her smile was thin, sharp, and satisfied, the kind that cuts both ways. The trap had closed perfectly, and a kind heart was cast out, not for what it did, but for what it made others feel. The afternoon wind swept through the apple hills, carrying dust along the road Clara had taken days ago. Inside the house, silence lingered. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating kind that settles when truth hides in plain sight. 3 days had passed since Clara left. Noah was recovering, though quieter than ever. He no longer smiled. His eyes often lingered on the window where she used to hum. Ethan watched him, heart twisting, yet he told himself he had done the right thing. That morning, while cleaning the old storage room, May and Tom stumbled upon a metal box covered in dust. Inside were old security cameras and a hard drive, long forgotten. May brushed off the dirt and frowned. "Tom, isn't this the old system Mr. Walker installed years ago?" Tom nodded slowly. He turned it off when the wiring failed, but the footage might still be in there. They exchanged a look. A quiet understanding passed between them, the kind born from knowing something had been wrong for far too long. That afternoon, while Vanessa was out shopping, May carried the drive to her room and asked Tom to connect it to an old computer. The screen flickered, then came to life. Footage from the living room, hallway, kitchen, moments from the days Clara was still in the house. May leaned closer. Her heart pounded. The footage showed Vanessa tilting the wine bottle. Another clip revealed her hand brushing the antique vase before it fell. Then came the most damning, Vanessa entering Noah's room, placing the box of chocolates, leaving a forged note. The truth was there, cruel, deliberate, undeniable. When Tom handed her the USB, his hand trembled. "We have to show him," he whispered. May nodded. "Tonight." That night, after Vanessa had gone upstairs, May knocked on the study door. Ethan sat behind his desk, shoulders slumped, face drawn and tired. She placed the small USB before him and said softly, "You should see this before it's too late." He looked at her, confused but weary, then inserted the drive. The screen lit up. The first images played, the crash of the wine bottle, Vanessa's deliberate tilt, Clara's startled face, then the vase, the chocolates, the forged note in clumsy handwriting. Ethan didn't move. Each frame cut deeper, like a blade through his chest. He couldn't hear anything but his own breath. Rough, uneven, breaking. When the video ended, he pressed a hand to his forehead, bowing low, fingers tightening until his knuckles whitened. Everything inside him collapsed. Pride, judgment, certainty. He had driven away the only person who had made his son smile, because he had chosen to believe the wrong voice. He rose, opened the window. The night wind entered, carrying the smell of earth and apples. For the first time in years, he let his tears fall. May stood quietly by the door, watching him, saying nothing. Her sigh was long and sad, the sigh of someone who'd seen too much of life's cruelty. The flickering screen still cast light on Ethan's face, revealing exhaustion, remorse, and something deeper, a fragile, aching wish for forgiveness. He stared at Clara's smile frozen in the video, her gentle eyes, her quiet faith, and whispered, voice trembling, "Oh God, what have I done?" That night, the house no longer slept. It breathed, heavy and broken, under the weight of a man's guilt and the truth he could no longer ignore. That night, after watching every second of the footage, Ethan didn't sleep. The glow from the screen lingered on his face until dawn, each frame a blade carving guilt into his chest. Every time Clara's smile appeared, his breath caught. By sunrise, he knew what he had to do. The truth could no longer stay hidden. When morning came, he walked into the kitchen where May was making coffee. "Gather everyone," he said quietly but firmly. There was something in his tone, final, resolute. Soon, the kitchen filled with tense silence. Tom stood near the door, May by the counter, Noah in his chair, and finally Vanessa entered, radiant, poised, as if the night before had never happened. "What's this all about?" she asked, her voice as smooth as ever. Ethan placed his laptop on the table, the small USB beside it. "We're going to watch something," he said simply. May's eyes met his. He opened the file. The video began, clear, undeniable. Vanessa tilting the wine bottle, her hand brushing the antique vase, her silhouette in Noah's room placing the chocolate box, leaving the forged note. For the first minute, Vanessa remained composed, though her knuckles whitened on the table's edge. But when the footage showed her slipping the golden bracelet into Clara's drawer, her breath hitched. Ethan looked straight at her. "Would you like to explain?" She gave a brittle laugh. Ethan, seriously? These old cameras? Anyone could have tampered with them. Maybe May or that maid of yours decided to set me up. May stepped forward. Those cameras were installed in 2018. No one touched them until yesterday. If someone tampered, it would have to be the person who walks into Noah's room at midnight. Vanessa's eyes turned sharp. Are you accusing me? Tom's calm voice broke the tension. No one has to accuse you, ma'am. The footage already did. Vanessa turned to Ethan, lowering her tone to a whisper laced with sugar. You can't believe I'd ever hurt Noah. I love that boy. Ethan's voice dropped, steady but cold. You call it love? Love that poisons him? Love that frames an innocent woman? Love that silences a child? The kitchen air grew thick. May's hand tightened on the table. In the corner, Noah sat quietly, his gaze locked on Vanessa. Then, in a trembling but clear voice, he said, I saw you do it. The room froze. Vanessa turned, her face drained of color. I wasn't asleep that night, Noah continued. I saw you put the candy on my desk. I saw you write something. Vanessa's breath quickened. He's a child. He's confused, Ethan. But Ethan didn't move. The truth was already carved in his eyes. He removed the USB, set it in the middle of the table, and said evenly, There's nothing left to say. Vanessa's mask cracked. She lunged forward, grabbing the USB, aiming for the fireplace. But May intercepted her, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. Don't, May said quietly, her voice like steel. You can burn plastic, but not guilt. Vanessa yanked free, her breathing ragged. You're all against me? For that woman? Ethan stepped closer, his tone firm, controlled. No, Vanessa, for the truth. He paused, the next words final and calm. Leave my house. Now. Her eyes darted from face to face, searching for pity and finding none. Even Noah, small and pale, stared back with quiet resolve. Tears welled up, then turned to a bitter laugh. You'll regret this, Ethan Walker. You'll lose everything. He didn't flinch. He opened the door, sunlight spilling in across the floor. You can take many things from me, Vanessa, he said softly, but not the truth. She hesitated, then turned sharply, heels striking hard against the wooden floor. The door slammed, and with it, the storm she had brought finally broke. Ethan stood still for a long moment, his shoulders trembling slightly. May touched his arm. Justice always finds its way back, she whispered. He nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon where the apple trees glowed under the new light. The morning had never felt so heavy, and yet for the first time, it felt clean. Because justice had spoken, and a heart once blind had finally learned to see. When the door closed behind Vanessa, silence didn't just fill the house, it filled him. Every echo of her heels became the echo of his mistakes. Morning light crept through the windows, soft but unforgiving, revealing the dust he'd refused to see, not on the furniture, but in his own heart. May poured a cup of black coffee and set it in front of him. There's one more thing you need to do, she said softly. Ethan looked up. He already knew. His voice was hoarse. Yes, I'll go. Today. That afternoon, he and Noah set out. The old truck rolled along the dirt road toward the nearby town. Neither spoke. The hum of the engine and the crunch of gravel filled the silence. Ethan's eyes stayed fixed ahead. Noah sat quietly, clutching a pressed yellow flower between the pages of a notebook. By the time they reached the small town, the sun was sinking low. Wooden houses lined the street, warm lights flickering on behind lace curtains. In front of a modest clinic, Ethan saw her, Clara, hair tied up, sleeves rolled, pushing her sister's wheelchair out to the porch to feel the evening breeze. He stopped the truck and stepped out. Noah followed, his small hand gripping his father's. Clara looked up. Their eyes met. A long, quiet moment that felt heavier than any words could bear. Ethan removed his hat, his voice unsteady. "I came to apologize." Clara's face remained calm, though sadness flickered deep in her eyes. "I didn't think I'd see you again so soon." Ethan took a step closer. "I believed the wrong person, Clara. And because of that, I hurt the only one who brought my son back to life." His voice broke. "I don't ask you to forget, only to forgive." Noah moved forward, voice trembling. "I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I missed you." Clara knelt, pulling him into her arms. "It's all right, sweetheart," she whispered. "I missed you too." The sound of wind chimes drifted through the air, mingling with the scent of lavender from the garden. Ethan watched, tears glistening in his eyes. Every tear washed away a little of the pride that had once blinded him. When Clara stood again, she faced him squarely. "I don't blame you anymore," she said quietly. "But if I'm to return, there will be 3 things that must never be broken." Ethan nodded. "Tell me." "First, respect. No one under that roof should look down on another, no matter their place. Second, truth. No secrets, no lies, no more shadows. And third, Noah decides his own pace. No pressure, no forcing. We walk beside him, not ahead." Ethan listened, head bowed. Those weren't conditions. They were reminders of everything he'd forgotten about love and decency. "I promise," he said softly. "Not with words, but with how I'll live." Clara studied him for a long moment, then smiled, a quiet smile carrying warmth and forgiveness, fragile but real. Ethan hesitated. "Will you come back? With us?" She looked at her sister, then at Noah's hopeful eyes. She exhaled gently. "I will, but this time, not as a servant, as someone who belongs." Noah laughed through tears and hugged her tightly. His laughter rang out, pure and bright, the first true sound of joy in months. Ethan turned away to hide the tears that burned his eyes. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in soft orange. The light touched them all, a silent witness to a new beginning born from honesty and pain. As they walked back to the truck, a light wind carried the scent of apple blossoms. Ethan opened the door for her, meeting her gaze. "I won't let anyone hurt you again, not even me." Clara answered softly, "Don't promise, just prove it, every day." He nodded, eyes fixed on the road that wound back to the farm. A road that, for the first time, led toward peace. A single yellow petal slipped from Noah's hand, caught the sunlight, and drifted down. Clara picked it up, smiling faintly. Her voice was low, almost a whisper to herself. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's learning to walk forward without turning your heart to stone. As they left the town, the last trace of sunset lingered over the rooftops, stretching across the dirt road that led back to Coal Valley. Clara sat quietly, eyes on the window where rows of apple trees blurred in the fading light. Noah leaned against her shoulder, fast asleep, still clutching the pressed yellow flower in his hands. Ethan drove slowly, saying nothing. Yet in that silence, they all knew. They weren't just going home. They were returning to a new beginning. The old pickup rattled softly as it turned onto the dirt road leading back to Coal Valley. The sky was tinted amber. Sunlight poured through the apple trees, painting the dust like golden mist. Clara watched the familiar landscape roll by. Same hills, same barns. But inside, everything felt lighter than the day she'd left. Noah sat between his father and her, gripping her hand. "Look, the trees on the East Hill have blossoms," he said with excitement. "You told me last year they wouldn't bloom this early." Clara smiled. Maybe the sky felt kind this spring. Ethan said nothing, his hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. He feared that even one careless word might disturb the fragile peace they'd only just begun to rebuild. When the wooden gate creaked open, May and Tom were already waiting by the porch. They didn't speak, just smiled. The kind of smile that welcomes not a guest, but family. Clara stepped out, breathing in the damp scent of grass and earth. For the first time, it smelled like home again. Her first evening back, she cleaned her small room beside the kitchen. Everything was as she'd left it, except for the dried yellow flower on the table. She touched it lightly. A few petals still held their color. From the doorway, Noah asked quietly, "You're staying? For real?" "For real," she answered softly. "This time I'm home." In the days that followed, the house began to change. Laughter returned, first faint, then brighter. Each morning, Clara and Noah continued their mini racetrack routine, and now Ethan often watched from the end of the hall. He didn't interrupt, didn't direct. He simply watched, learning how healing looks. One morning, Noah reached the far wall for the first time. Clara cheered. The boy raised his crutches like trophies. From a distance, Ethan clapped, not as a master of the house, but as a father proud beyond words. That afternoon, the kitchen smelled of apple pie again. May laughed, saying, "It's been ages since I heard both of you laugh like that." Ethan nodded quietly. It's been a long time since this house truly lived. At dusk, the three of them sat by the window, watching the orchard sway in the wind. Clara set down her teacup and said gently, "Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it lets you see it without pain." Ethan met her gaze, voice low. "Thank you for giving us another chance." She smiled. "No one's perfect, Ethan. We just have to choose what's worth keeping." Noah, sitting between them, giggled as he played with a freshly picked yellow flower. "I'm going to plant a whole garden of these," he said, "so when people are sad, they can look at them and feel happy again." Clara brushed his hair. "Then remember to water them, love. Flowers need care, just like people do." Outside, twilight faded, and the house glowed warm with light. The laughter carried softly through the open windows. Pure, unguarded, real. Ethan looked around the kitchen, once filled with suspicion, now alive with warmth. He realized redemption wasn't one grand gesture, but the quiet choice to be kind every single day. Later that night, before heading to bed, he stopped by the mini racetrack. Moonlight shone across the polished wood floor, reflecting two sets of footprints. One small, one larger, both learning to walk again. He whispered, barely audible, "Thank you for coming back, Clara." A soft breeze drifted through the window, stirring the yellow flower on the sill. It trembled gently in the light, and within that sound, faint but certain, was what the house had been missing for so long: laughter. The next morning, while the orchard was still veiled in mist, the phone rang in the quiet kitchen. Ethan set down his coffee cup and answered. On the line was Attorney Bennett, his voice calm and precise. "The court has accepted the evidence. Vanessa Reed is now officially charged with defamation, endangerment, and obstruction of justice." Ethan didn't speak for a while. Morning light streamed through the window, cutting across the table in soft gold. "Thank you, Bennett," he finally said, and hung up. Clara entered carrying the scent of warm tea. She saw his face and knew at once. Ethan nodded slowly, voice low. Justice has begun to speak. She poured him tea, quiet and composed. There was no triumph in her eyes, only release, the kind that comes when a burden finally slides off the heart. Word spread quickly through the small town. Everyone knew the old story between Vanessa and the Walker family, but this time, the whispers carried Clara's name with respect. At the marketplace, people greeted her kindly. Some even smiled. The florist said softly, "Justice comes late sometimes, but when it does, it smells like ripe apples." Clara smiled, "And it's always worth the wait." That afternoon, Ethan invited May and Tom to the back porch. The table was set with a pot of tea, the fields glowing gold under the late sun. Sparrows fluttered on the railing, chirping, as if they too sensed peace had finally returned. Ethan looked at them with gratitude. "If it weren't for you, I'd still be blind to the truth. You both showed me what real loyalty means." May chuckled gently. "Sometimes people only need a little light to see the right path. The rest is their choice." Tom nodded. "And you chose to make it right, sir. That's what matters." Ethan bowed his head. He couldn't undo his mistakes, but he could carry them with honesty and walk forward. Weeks later, the local court issued its verdict. Vanessa Reed was found guilty of defamation, emotional harm, and deliberate endangerment. She was ordered to issue a public apology and pay restitution to Clara Evans. The news aired on the local radio at noon. Everyone in the farmhouse listened in silence. Noah sat cross-legged by the fireplace, eyes wide. When he heard Clara's name followed by the words, "cleared of all accusations," he turned, beaming. "They said your name, Miss Clara." She smiled, brushing his hair. "Yes, sweetheart. That means the truth finally found its voice." Ethan's gaze lingered on her. Gratitude filled his chest, not only for her forgiveness, but for teaching him what faith and integrity truly meant. That evening, Clara stepped into the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. She picked a small wildflower and placed it in a jar on the windowsill, the same spot where a wilted one had once stood. Now it bloomed bright and alive, a quiet testament to renewal. Ethan joined her. "I used to think justice lived in the courtroom," he said softly. "But now I know. It starts here." He placed a hand over his chest. "When we have the courage to admit we were wrong." Clara's eyes softened. "You're right. Justice isn't just black and white. It has the color of truth, compassion, and of people brave enough to change." They stood side by side as the day faded into night. From inside the house, Noah's laughter floated out, clear, innocent, echoing through the orchard like a promise that everything broken could be mended. Justice hadn't arrived with thunder or noise. It came like dawn, slow, gentle, yet bright enough to wash away the shadows. And under that light, Coal Valley finally returned to its true colors, the colors of honesty, redemption, and grace. In the weeks after the trial, Coal Valley settled into peace. The orchards were heavy with fruit, and the air was sweet with the scent of ripe apples. Each morning, laughter echoed through the yard. Each evening, sunlight turned the farmhouse walls to gold. Ethan often finished work early just to watch them, Clara and Noah, out in the garden. The boy picked apples carefully, while Clara, hair tied and sleeves rolled, wiped his brow with a smile that made the world feel softer. The light caught her face, and for the first time, Ethan understood what warmth truly looked like. One quiet evening after dinner, May gathered everyone outside. "The apples are redder than ever this year," she said. "I think heaven's smiling on us." Tom chuckled. "Or maybe heaven's smiling on someone in particular." Laughter rippled through the group, except Ethan, who simply glanced at Clara, a look full of things words couldn't hold. As the sun sank behind the hills, Clara walked beneath the largest apple tree, the one Noah once called the Dream Keeper. Red fruit glowed between the leaves, shimmering like lanterns in the fading light. Ethan approached slowly, something small hidden in his hand. He stopped beside her, voice quiet but steady. "This tree," he said. "Clara and I planted it years ago. Every harvest, she'd tell me the same thing. Home isn't walls, Ethan. It's where someone waits for you." Clara turned toward him, wind lifting a few strands of her hair. Ethan opened a small wooden box. Inside was a simple silver ring, modest but shining with the gentleness of moonlight. "I finally understand," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Home isn't what you build. It's what you find peace in. Clara, I can't change what I did, but I want to write the rest of my life with you. Will you stay with me?" Clara's breath trembled. She looked at the ring, then at him, the man who had fallen, learned, and risen again. "Ethan," she whispered, "I was afraid to trust again. But I've learned faith grows like this orchard. If you care for it, it blooms again." She extended her hand. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, perfect in fit, as if it had always waited there. His smile came slow and real, like dawn after a long storm. From behind the trees, May and Tom watched, eyes glistening. "Told you," May murmured. "This house just needed a hand that knew how to heal." Tom nodded, voice thick, and I just wanted to hear laughter again. Then came Noah, cheeks flushed, hands clutching 2 red apples. He stopped, looked up at them both, and said a single word that hung in the golden air. "Mom." The orchard stilled. Clara froze, tears welling instantly. Ethan laid a trembling hand on his son's shoulder. Noah repeated, softer but clear, "Can I call you Mom?" Clara knelt, pulling him close, her tears falling into his hair. "Of course, sweetheart. I'd be honored." Noah giggled, hugging her tight. "Then you have to stay forever, okay?" Ethan's voice broke as he whispered, "You both will. Always." The sun dipped fully below the ridge, yet the orchard glowed golden with the last of its light. The breeze stirred the branches, scattering the scent of apples and the sound of joy. May and Tom stepped forward, clapping gently, while Noah exclaimed, "Let's have a wedding right here under this tree." Laughter filled the valley, unguarded, bright, alive. Clara looked up at the sky where the first stars began to appear. She took Ethan's hand, eyes glimmering. "Maybe the real miracle isn't justice or luck," she said softly. "Maybe it's that broken hearts can still choose to love again." Ethan met her gaze, whispering, "And that we find someone who makes us call this place home." Beneath the apple tree, they embraced. No grand vows, no audience needed. Only sunset, breath, and a beginning as simple and pure as the taste of ripe apples. Spring winds brushed over the hills, carrying the scent of young apples and birdsong. 6 months after Ethan's proposal under the apple tree, Coal Valley bloomed again, this time with laughter and joy. The wedding was held in the orchard, under soft afternoon light. Ribbons fluttered between the branches, white petals falling like snow. Noah darted between the rows, tossing yellow flowers and shouting, "Mom, am I doing it right?" Clara bent down, fixing his little crown of blooms. her smile radiant. Ethan stood at the altar, simple suit, steady heart. When Clara appeared, dressed in white and bathed in sunset light, everything else faded away. May wiped her tears. Tom patted Ethan's shoulder. "Don't lose her this time," he murmured. Ethan smiled faintly and reached for Clara's hand. No grand ceremony, no lavish stage, just the fragrance of apples, soft music, and people who meant it. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, he whispered, "Home isn't the walls, it's who you come back to." Clara smiled, her eyes shining. "And I've come home." A year passed. The orchard thrived, now not just a farm, but a place of heart. Visitors came to pick apples, learn to care for the trees, bake pies, and slow down. Children's laughter mingled with the hum of bees and the scent of fruit. Noah walked confidently now, a hint of a limp, but strong and proud. He guided young visitors through the mini racetrack, telling them, "This is where I learned to walk again," with Mom Clara. May kept the kitchen warm with pies and tea. Tom taught pruning classes, and Ethan watched them all from the porch, smiling. The quiet, peaceful smile of a man who'd found his way home. Clara opened a small wooden classroom by the orchard. Every weekend, she taught about kindness and healing, how truth and compassion could mend even the most broken souls. Her students left lighter, touched by her calm strength. Every morning, before the day began, Clara placed a yellow flower on the windowsill. Ethan once asked, "You do that to remember?" She shook her head gently. "Not to remember, to remind myself that beauty often grows from pain." Noah came running in, hands muddy, laughing. "Mom, your flower bloomed!" She knelt, smiling. "Of course it did. You watered it every day." The wind rustled through the orchard, carrying sunlight across the hills. May, Tom, Ethan, Clara, and Noah stood together. 5 people once broken, now whole again. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer hurt. It had become soil, rich enough for new life to grow. At the gate, a small wooden sign read, "Coal Valley, where hearts learn to bloom." Clara looked at it, her eyes soft in the morning light, and whispered the words that would stay with her forever. Love and truth don't erase the past, but they teach us to bloom from our scars.